Does it meet our health care reform needs? And we'll let Wayne begin with that.
Thank you everyone for coming. And as someone who is not a healthcare professional, should I stand? Sure. As someone who is not a healthcare professional, but someone who has had to use our healthcare system, I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself as it relates to the topic tonight. I am one of the Americans, thank you, I am one of the Americans in that very first category. I am a cancer survivor. Now, the interesting thing about that is, you may have heard my little bio, I've done a couple different things. I was in the United States Navy. I worked for a time as a private investigator, and for 20 years I was a broadcaster on radio here in Connecticut. Well, I worked very hard in my life and always had pretty decent insurance. However, I waited until the one time in my life that I didn't have insurance to get cancer. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer not a couple years ago, last year. As a matter of fact, May 17th, 2011, when I got my diagnosis. And by the way, two things I learned that day. Number one, doctors are kind of funny when they actually give you that news, you know, because I guess, you know, there's no way to do it but to say it, and they do it all the time, so, you know, it's kind of no big deal. But on the other hand, it's a big deal hearing it. So my doctor just kind of looked at me, flipped open my chart, and I'm sitting there across the desk from going, do what, do what, do what? And just kind of looks at me, oh, well, there's a cancer there. Yeah, there's a tumor. And I'm like, okay. And those words actually almost physically struck me in the chest. And immediately after that, you know, the doctor gave me the recommended treatment, which in my case, I had prostate cancer, and the treatment that he recommended based on my overall health and my age, I was only at that time, I was 47, I'm not even 48 yet, and he recommended the robotic surgery, which is the latest treatment for that type of cancer. Well, what I learned was, guess what? Since I didn't have insurance, remember? So I had to rely on the state insurance, the government insurance. It's here in Connecticut, the Husky plan. Guess what? The government's insurance, while it will give you treatment, it's not necessarily what your doctor recommends. I was told that, oh, well, we don't pay for that. That's too expensive. For you have their normal scalpel surgery, you know, and that's good enough. You'll live. It's fine. So I went to the surgeon, and when my wife and I walked into the doctor's office, we weren't praying about whether or not I was going to survive. You know, my chances were good. We caught it early. I was praying that the doctor would somehow find a way to give me the good surgery. Here's what actually happened. My surgeon was the head of the robotic surgery department at Norwalk Hospital. And he looked at me, looked at my chart, and he said, well, I don't participate in the government health insurance, you know. I'm, you know, a top-of-the-line surgeon. You know, my patients either, you know, they pay cash, they have health insurance, etc. I don't have to. He says, but you know what? You're a young guy. There's no reason to cut you like that. I make enough money in the private sector that every once in a while, you know what? I can actually take the hit and do the surgery for people like you. So he did. What I learned coming out of that is that, number one, I was very fortunate. But guess what? A lot of people don't get the recommendation, the treatment that their doctor recommends. Something called the patient-doctor relationship. And I don't know about you, but I would rather have the treatment for whatever ails me or my family that the doctor recommends rather than what the government will pay for. That, to me, is one of the fundamental flaws about our current Affordable Health Care Act, is that at the end of the day, it is all based on cost rather than what our doctors recommend. The other thing that I find objectionable about the current healthcare reform law is this. As an American, as someone who wore the uniform of the United States Navy to defend my country from all enemies, both foreign and domestic, I have a very, very, very strong connection with freedom. As Americans, it is our birthright. We get to say that. And I believe to my core that we should never, ever give our federal government the absolute power to order or require American citizens to buy any product or not buy any product, even if it is something that is benevolent, like health care. So at the end of the day, my opinion is this. I believe that our Healthcare Reform Act, as it currently stands, is a noble idea executed very badly, because long term it is unsustainable, because the health care, it will be based on cost, covering more and more people by lowering the bar on what they get. And again, this is not as someone who is a medical doctor. I am not. But I can tell you that as someone who has, there's a lot of talk, politicians like to talk a lot about the safety net and the need for it, or we don't need it, whatever. Well, for most of them, I would say almost all of them, the safety net's a theory. It's something that they talk about but have never had to use. As someone who has actually had to use the safety net, I think I have a different perspective when it comes to talking about what it does and doesn't do. So I can tell you, yes, the idea is not to burn the safety net, but to make sure that, number one, people don't have to live in it, and that it does what it's supposed to do. And so I am going to, for as much as I'm offering my opinion, my personal story, the main thing I'm going to do is what I'm going to do as your next congressional representative, which is listen and act accordingly. We have two experts in the financial arena, and we're going to learn a lot about what the costs, both short-term and long-term, of PPACA. Did I say it right? You notice I avoided saying that until just now, because I was thinking if I had it right. But as someone who will have a finger, if you will, on the nation's purse strings as a congressional legislator, it is important to know what the cost is, because guess what? The cost for anything, regardless of what our incumbent politicians tell you, it's your money. Government doesn't buy or sell anything, so any money that the government has is yours, it's ours. And we want to make sure that we are getting the best for our money. And when it comes to our health coverage, yes, I believe that we should be able to have health coverage for as many Americans as possible, as affordable as possible. But the key word is it has to be affordable, both for the customer and the provider. And one of the things that we want to look at least I want to look at, is how to lower the expense of health care at the provider end, because that will enable more people to be covered at less expense, perhaps getting rid of some of those frivolous lawsuits through tort reform and some of the other regulations that we have to deal with. So I'm going to turn the microphone